Everyone. I'm going to take you down the hunting rabbit hole, pun intended. This week, I'm going to go more into depth about the idea of the hunter hero, what they promoted, and how they helped form sort of a masculine identity for men lost in a time of great societal change, great economic change during the shift from the traditional Jeffersonian agrarian economy to one that was more driven by market forces and industrialization. The first article I'm going to cover to kind of trace this for you is called Hunting and the American Identity: The Rise, Fall, Rise and Fall. This title is, I think there's a typo here. Hunting and American Identity: The Rise, and Fall of an American Pastime. That is an awful title, but besides the point. This article talks about how the American identity of the 19th and early 20th centuries is tied to hunting. The United States, as we all know as historians, was industrializing, and people were migrating towards cities. The hinterlands, rural America, was becoming increasingly abandoned, and this hunting gave particularly men a sense of purpose that was long lost. To put it in more modern terms, something that we see today, especially those of us in the Midwest, in the Rust Belt, Detroit, with the auto industry. Again, men in particular, our identity is tied into our work and what we can produce and how much we can provide for ourselves, for a family, for parents, whoever. And when that's taken away, we kind of get lost and turned to the more negative sides of life, be it this time, alcoholism was on the rise. Unfortunately, now it's a little more serious with opioids. But the hunter hero and the literature they helped produce, either self-published like Daniel Boone, or they were ghost or underwritten like some of the others, helped kind of give men a lighthouse on this very torrid ocean of an identity crisis. And the reason that this ties into American identity was that from the very get-go of colonization, hunting was seen as a right, as a means to provide for your family, for your small community, or even for an entire colony. And this right snowballed until the ideology of manifest destiny grew. And I'm going to keep referencing Daniel Boone because I have an article about Daniel Boone. That's what I'm going to roll into next, and this is a great segue. Daniel Boone and Davy Crockett as well were amazing figures for this heroic, rugged, independent hunter gatherer. He was the ideal picture of honor and a life steeped in masculine, honorable tradition. And like I said, segueing into it, another article by Daniel Herman called "The Other Daniel Boone: The Nascence of a Middle Class Hunter Hero, 1784 to 1860." Daniel Boone, Herman argues, was not seen as a throwback or a ancient, not ancient, but a outdated or outmoded figure. But he was a bridge for the middle class in 19th century America to, like I covered before, this new identity. Between his buckskin clothing, his Kentucky and Hawken long rifles, his mannerisms, the way he carried himself, the way he spoke, even his illiteracy at times, spoke to middle-class men searching for self-control, some sort of stability, and some sort of station in a society that was quickly leaving them behind. He was the perfect, Daniel Boone and Crockett as well, was a perfect representation of the old agrarian identity. Boone represented chivalry, composure, and a real sense of decisiveness that was lacking in a lot of people's lives. The market was changing. The world was changing rapidly. Again, to compare it to something in the modern times, we hear about artificial intelligence. I mean, we have cars now that drive themselves and report to repair centers that there's a problem. So that's another rich American pastime that's slowly being taken over by computers. Americans love to drive. We created an entire highway system not just for road trips. But the notion of chivalry, self-possession, self-independence, all of these classic American American identities were being challenged. And these conditions fueled the popularity of hunting, fueled the popularity of Boone and rugged independence. And underpinning it all was this idea of manifest destiny, because to get away from it all, you had to move west. And the demarcation for west kept getting pushed further and further out. And what really helped spur that on was that guys like Boone, Crockett, and some of these higher class men treated the Rockies, Montana, Wyoming, northern Idaho, Utah, Colorado as a American Serengeti. And Karen Jones in My Winchester spoke to her, crafting the Northern Rockies as a hunter paradise, circa 1870 to 1910. That was a coin she termed. The Rockies were becoming celebrated just as the Serengeti Plains of Africa. I mean, picture Lion King, the opening sequence to Lion King when Elton John is belting Circle of Life. You've got the giraffes, the water buffalo, cheetahs, all that beautiful, just iconic African wildlife. But picture that with elk, bighorn sheep, grizzlies, and all that. That's what the Rockies was being painted as. She also has a brilliant way of putting it. She called it pioneer exoticism. And again, big game hunting, individuality, ruggedness, manly honor, and identity were all wrapped up into this and fueled it. So Western and expansion, and in a lot of ways imperial tourism, helped fuel this notion of the hunter hero. This hunter hero, this character, transcended political and economic and societal stratification. any man could be the hunter hero. We're talking from the dregs of Boston all the way up to the biggest, richest plantation in the middle of South Carolina. And because the West, primarily the Rockies were painted as this playground, it gave them a great backdrop to form these codes of manhood, this nature of sport and gunplay, and it gave these people a sense of belonging, a real true sense of belonging. That was gone, that factories and assembly lines couldn't give them. Thanks for listening this week. I really appreciate it. You guys have a good rest of your weekend.